In this video, I'm going to be breaking down how I made over $100,000 tracked verified profit on Underdog Fantasy. It's a very exploitable book. I don't bet with my gut. To be clear, I'm not a ball expert. I mean, I do love watching sports, but all of the strategies, all of the math we're going to discuss is sharp, data-driven strategies that actually work long time and are based in math. But I do want to make it clear, anybody can do this. You don't need a computer science, a math background. If you put in the work, you watch this video, you take some time to understand it, I promise you, you can get to tens of thousands of dollars in profit on Underdog Fantasy. It's not that hard. And if you have any questions, obviously comment them below. Some people will say, and it's true, hey, on Underdog, you made a lot of money initially, but over the past 2 years, it's been pretty flat. And that is true. Unfortunately, on Underdog Fantasy, I made too much money off them, I guess, that they've cut down my max bet size to $25 per play, and I can actually only bet $75 per day. So I no longer am betting a ton of my own money on Underdog Fantasy. I'll still give out plays on live streams. I love to live stream on Twitch, where I give out all my picks for a day for free. But again, that kind of sucks. It is what it is, but that's why my profit graph goes flat. You know, a lot of sports books, they don't like winners, but I'd rather have $100,000 profit compared to an Underdog account where I can play $1,000 a slip like the good old days. However, what I wanted to explain is what is Underdog Fantasy first. So Underdog Fantasy, it's a DFS platform similar to PrizePicks, similar to Betr Picks that has fixed payouts. So what does that mean, right? On Underdog Fantasy, any 3-pick entry, as an example, any 3-pick entry, you're getting a 6x payout. You can take WNBA picks, tennis picks, whatever. Like you can see in this little, video I made, if you take Emmett to go over or under 39.5 significant strikes, you're still getting a 6x payout. So it is what I call a fixed payout sportsbook. That's Underdog Fantasy. And the first thing I wanted to discuss in this video is what type of slip should you go with on Underdog? Because there's a bunch of different slips you can run, right? You can run a 2-pick entry, you can run a 5-pick entry, a 3-pick entry, a 3-pick entry with insurance. There's all these different slips, and it does really matter on these fixed payout DFS apps. It's the most important thing, what type of slip you're actually betting. So I'll give you a simple example, is on Betr Picks, which is a competitor to Underdog Fantasy. It's Jake Paul's DFS app. For a 3-pick entry, Betr only gives you a 5x payout. And Betr typically has very similar lines to Underdog Fantasy. So if you bet a 3-man on Betr, Jake Paul's app, you're getting 100 to win 500. Whereas the exact same play would be $100 to win $600, a 6x payout on Underdog Fantasy. So the type of slip you go with on all of these different fixed payout DFS apps, it's not just Underdog, but it's really important. So on Underdog Fantasy, the mathematically optimal, slip type is a 6-pick flex play. Granted, 3-pick entries with a 6x payout, no insurance, they're not horrible. So sometimes if there's 3 amazing picks on the board and I just want to get them locked in and they're all super plus EV, they have a super high edge, I'll just run a 3-pick entry. But in general, I am running 6-mans on Underdog Fantasy, right? And this is based in math. This isn't personal preference. Some people will be like, well, I'm having success with 2-mans. No, you're not. No, you're not, right? You just haven't placed enough bets. It is literally mathematically proven. You can go through the math. I'll include a spreadsheet in the description going through the math of each of the different slip types on Underdog. It is just math. 6-pick entries are the optimal slip type, and I can prove it to you. So that's what I'm usually giving out. Is you can see in this 6-pick entry, I included Bryce Young under 218.5 passing yards. So on Underdog Fantasy, any 6-pick flex play has the exact same payout. So everything just boils down to what percent of your picks can you win. You want to find, Underdog has tens of thousands of lines up, you want to find the 6 picks with the highest possible win rate. Right? So let's just say, as a very simple example, you can win your picks, your over-unders, like Bryce Young, over under 218.5 passing yards, you can win your picks 56% of the time, which, by the way, is really good. That would mean you have a real edge, right? You're winning 56% of your over-unders, only losing 44% like Bryce Young's over-under. You got to remember, Underdog Fantasy, they're setting these lines, they're trying to set these lines to be roughly 50-50, where a player, right, they're trying to find the spot for Bryce Young where there's an equal probability he goes over or under. So you need a real edge. But if you can win your picks 56% of the time, guess what your ROI is going to be? Because it seems pretty good. You're winning 56%, only losing 44%. You're still going to lose money on 2-pick entries. Your ROI is going to be negative 6%. And you can see the math on the screen right here. And again, the spreadsheet's going to be in the description. You can go through it, play around with the numbers, see if I messed up my math, do whatever you want to do. For a Underdog 6-man, however, if you can win your over-unders 56% of the time, your ROI is going to be 22%. You're going to be super profitable, right? Negative 6% versus 22%, all from just figuring out the optimal slip type. So why did I run Bryce Young? Why did I take his under? We're going to get into strategies a bit later in the video, but the reason I decided to take his under was Bryce Young was a cross-market plus EV bet. So cross-market plus EV betting, I'll include a thumbnail here. I've made full videos about it, right? I definitely recommend watching this. Cross-market EV betting is the main and the most profitable sports betting strategy I use, but basically really sharp books like ProfitX and Novig, they had Bryce Young as a big underdog, right, to go over. So his under was the much more likely outcome. So long story short, it was a pick winning 56% of the time or so, and therefore it's a profitable play in a 6-pick entry. Not a 2-pick entry, to be clear, but in a 6-pick entry. But what I want to do first, how I'm going to lay out this video, is I'm going to take you through the math behind Underdog just for like a couple more minutes. I'll give you a screen share, kind of break down some numbers, some situations, try to prove to you, right? Because you really need to internalize it, why 6-pick entries are mathematically optimal. And then we're going to get into actual strategies that I use every single day to get the results that I'm getting. So without further ado, let's get into it. So let's go through the math behind Underdog Fantasy a bit deeper, right? So you have to remember winning 60% of your picks on Underdog is nearly impossible. If you could win 60% of your over-unders, just like Kyren Williams, picking his over or under 67.5 rushing yards, you would be really profitable on Underdog Fantasy regardless of the type of slip you went with. For 2-mans, your ROI would be 8%, right? I just can update the win percentage and it tells me my ROI. I'll include this spreadsheet in the description so you can play around with it. But you'd still want to run 6-pick flex plays, right? Your ROI would be 73%, which obviously would be incredible. Everything on Underdog Fantasy, right? Because any 3-pick entry, so let's go here, because any 3-pick entry on Underdog has the same payout, a 6x payout, it doesn't matter what picks you go with, over, under, whatever. Everything just boils down to finding the 6 picks on Underdog Fantasy that have the highest possible win rate. If you're doing that and your picks are winning enough of the time, you're going to be profitable. It doesn't matter what sport, what league, anything like that. But you have to remember a 60% win rate is nearly impossible. Sports books like FanDuel, Underdog, they set their lines, right, for these player props like rushing yards to be roughly 50-50. You can see FanDuel for Kyren Williams. They're giving you the same odds on both his over and his under, -114, -114. So they're basically saying both outcomes are equally likely, 50-50. So you're not going to be able to just blindly take picks on Underdog Fantasy and have a 60% win rate. That's nearly impossible. These sports books are way too smart, right? Even professional sports bettors, right? They're winning their picks 55, 56, 57% of the time, not 80% of the time. That's impossible. FanDuel's a $40 billion company. They're not that stupid. You're not going to be able to blindly bet and win 80% of your picks. But regardless, you can kind of play around with this spreadsheet. Again, I'll include it in the description. So for a 6-pick entry on Underdog, you basically need to win 53.8% of your over-unders. So you need to win about 54% of your picks, only losing 46% to make money long-term. Here you can see all the math, all the payouts, everything like that. And in my opinion, it's kind of fun to play around with because you can see, okay, if I can win 55% of my picks, I can win my plays like Kyron's over or under in rushing yards. I can win 55%, only losing 45%. I'm going to have an ROI of negative 9% playing 2-pick entries on Underdog, whereas if I was playing 6-mans, my ROI would be 11.5%. Everything needs to be based in math and data on Underdog, so this is a little bit about win rate. I'll include the spreadsheet. I highly encourage you to play around with it. I think it's super useful. So we just went through the math behind Underdog Fantasy, 6-pick flex plays. That's the best type of slip. And you're getting minus 116 implied odds. So basically, the way you should be thinking as a sharp bettor is whatever you bet on Underdog, right, in a 6-pick entry, you should assume you're betting it at minus 116 odds because that's what you're getting, right? WNBA, overs, unders, it doesn't matter. Anything you bet, you're getting minus 116. So for example, you can see FanDuel has CMC's rushing yards line at 56.5, minus 114 juice. So you would never include CMC rushing in an Underdog slip, assuming his line was the same. If his line were 56.5, you would not want to include this in an Underdog Fantasy slip because you're getting minus 116. On FanDuel, you can get a better price. You can get better odds, minus 114, minus 114. All of this stuff makes a massive difference long term, and that's the way you need to orient your brain as a sharp bettor if you want to make money. However, what I did end up playing is Trent Grisham under to not score a run in an Underdog entry. Here you can see an Underdog 6-man. I really believe when I started sports betting, the best way to learn sharp, profitable strategies is going through a bunch of examples. So in this Underdog slip, I have Trent Grisham to not score a run, right? If I take his over or his under, I'm getting minus 116. You can see all of the sports books had his under heavily favored. So this play was just right off the OddsJam positive EV tool. All it does is read in millions of sportsbook odds, underdog lines in real time, compare them against each other to point out value. So basically, if every sportsbook is telling you, hey, his under's a lot more likely, that's the favored outcome, Underdog gives you the same price if you take his over or his under, then yeah, you can kind of go through the math. This is a mathematically profitable bet, getting his under at minus 116 odds, and therefore it's a mathematically profitable bet to include this in an Underdog 6-man. And again, you don't need a bet on every player, every team. Sometimes the value is in the most weird niche markets, right? When you think about the Yankees, playoff baseball, everyone wants to bet on Aaron Judge. Well, there's no value on Aaron Judge right now. Right? I am a value-driven sports bettor. I want to bet where there's an edge. So the first thing I do is I just use the OddsJam positive EV tool to compare Underdog lines to sportsbooks and find plus EV bets at minus 116 odds. The second thing I look for is line discrepancies, okay? So, for example, I got this play off the OddsJam line discrepancy tool. I'm taking Chandler over 19.5 rushing yards. So here, what you'll notice is all these other sportsbooks had Chandler's line higher as sportsbooks started to drop college football prop lines for the upcoming, weekend. FanDuel had him at 30.5. So literally 1.5 times higher than Underdog Fantasy. FanDuel's a $40 billion company with teams of data scientists. They're experts in setting lines. They're taking bets for millions of customers, adjusting their lines accordingly, right? If all the sharps bet the over, they'll keep taking the line higher. So basically, all of these other books setting lines are data points telling us, hey, getting the over 19.5 on Underdog is really good value. It's a really good deal. So again, I also find a ton of line discrepancies. That's been super effective for me on Underdog Fantasy, especially in more niche markets like esports. There's sometimes in CS2, League of Legends, massive line discrepancies, massive edges. I mean, out of my $100,000 profit on Underdog, probably like 40%, 35% is from esports. There's so many esports games, so much opportunity. So I'm not only betting on the main sports like the NBA. And the final thing I do is I look for crossed markets. So going back to this slip, we've already broken down a couple of the picks. You can see I'm on Bowers over 48.5 receiving yards, right? And again, I'm getting that at minus 116 odds, essentially when you go through the math behind an underdog six-man. So I found this on OddsJam from the crossed market tool. And what you're going to see is ProfitX. ProfitX is a very sharp book. They have his over listed at plus 128 odds, or his under, I apologize. They were offering Bowers under 48.5 receiving yards at plus 128 odds. So that's a crossed market. You can get Bowers' under at plus 128 or his over in an underdog six-man at minus 116. You can't be able to bet 116 to win 100 on the over and 100 to win 128 on the under. It doesn't make any sense. You have a crossed market. One of these two bets has to be profitable. So ProfitX is a very sharp book. It's a peer-to-peer betting exchange. But again, I want to make this super clear. These peer-to-peer betting exchanges, the people setting lines and offering liquidity, offering prices you can bet against, you're not betting against the house, you're not betting against ProfitX, you're betting against other people. But typically the people setting lines almost always are trading firms, hedge funds, really smart people, right? Now that sports betting has gotten so popular, you have trading firms, stuff like that, really smart people offering these lines, offering markets on these peer-to-peer betting exchanges. So the counterparties you're trading against in general on ProfitX is one of the main exchanges, also Novig, are extremely sharp, extremely sophisticated, extremely smart. And they're telling you, hey, we'll let you bet on Bowers to go under at plus 128. We'll give you plus money, underdog odds, and pretty good price, plus 128. So what I'm doing is I'm using that information from the exchange to realize, hey, Bowers is actually a lot more likely to go over 48.5. This is a crossed market. So I'm using exchange data, exchange information to exploit inefficiencies on Underdog Fantasy. So I took his over 48.5. So what I want to do next, I've broken down some different strategies. How do I find picks? Is literally just take you through a short video. If I were to find an Underdog Fantasy slip, I wanted to create a mathematically profitable plus EV slip. How would I do it? So I'm going to show you how to build an Underdog slip from scratch in the next clip. And again, if you have any questions, comment them below. Also, other video ideas. You know, I love making sports betting content, so whatever you guys want to see, please just let me know. So let's get into Underdog Fantasy, actually building a profitable six-pick entry, right? You always want to go for six-pick entries, and typically I start out on this OddsJam positive EV tool. You can just filter in underdog six-mans. So if you go here, underdog six-pick entries, again, depending on the type of slip you go with, you're going to get different prices. Six-pick entries are the best, minus 116 implied odds. Minus 122, minus 122, that's for three-mans or five-mans, and then this was the two-pick entries. You're getting a lot of juice. Two-pick entries on Underdog are awful, which we kind of showed earlier. It's broken down in the spreadsheet. So again, the price on Underdog, if you take the over or the under, are exactly the same. Because again, if you take an over or an under on Underdog, your payout doesn't change. Except for in some very rare cases, if you're including picks in the same game and they're correlated. But basically, if we take a look at this play on Dak Prescott, you can see FanDuel, right? Not a ton of books already have lines up for Sunday. I'm recording this video on a Wednesday. But you can see FanDuel, a $40 billion company, you want to put some weight into their odds. They have Dak, right, as a minus 140 favorite to go under. So they are telling you through their odds, FanDuel has teams of data scientists, they're taking bets, adjusting lines based on where action's coming in. FanDuel, Fliff, like the early sports books that are posting lines are telling you, hey, Dak's a lot more likely to go under as opposed to over. So basically, this is a profitable pick on Underdog Fantasy. You could also get this on some of the other fixed payout DFS sites like Betr, Owner's Box, PrizePicks that are competitors to Underdog. But because Underdog gives you the best payouts in the DFS industry, if you're running their 6-pick entry, only for their 6-pick entry, I want to run this in an Underdog 6-man if possible. So what you can actually do too is you can go to a win calculator and put in FanDuel's market. So FanDuel, a $40 billion company, we want to put some weight into their odds. What I can do is I can go to this little calculator. It's called a no-vig odds calculator. Put in FanDuel's market. We know the under is the favored outcome, a minus 140 favorite. So what this does is it essentially devigs the market and tells you the win probability. So basically what FanDuel is telling you is, hey, Dak is a 54.82% favorite to go under, and then he is an underdog, 45% to go over. So I think I said this earlier, but if we go back to the Underdog math breakdown, for a 6-pick entry, you only need to win 53.8% of your picks to be profitable. This pick is winning 54.82% of the time, which is higher, which is why this bet is profitable in an Underdog Fantasy slip, is if we were able to win all our picks, 54.8% of the time, our ROI would be roughly 10%. So again, there's not a ton of games going on right now, but what I can do next is go over to the OddsJam line discrepancy tool or the fantasy optimizer. Typically, I put in minimum number of data points 2, right? I want to see multiple points of confirming evidence. So for this play on Alyssa Thomas, it's recommending we bet her under. You can see here, all the other books have her line lower. So FanDuel is saying, no, early bet for the WNBA finals. We think her line should actually be lower at 25.5. So this is a line discrepancy. There's also pre-match and live bets. I don't do a lot of live betting on Underdog. It's very difficult, right? Live lines when a player's, running up and down the field, they oftentimes move very, very quickly. So long story short, in general, I'm not running these live plays, but what I can do is just find some line discrepancies. So you can see here, this seems solid. Jaden Baugh, college football play, over 60.5 rushing yards. Every other book has his line, at 66.5, a little bit higher. Bovada has him at 66.5. So that's another line discrepancy. FanDuel's definitely a smarter book than Underdog Fantasy. So basically what I try to do is just find, 6 picks that I can include into my slip that are all plus EV. Again, the board's a little drier than it usually would be for, say, an NFL Sunday. On an NFL Sunday, so we have center over 18.5 games. Maybe sometimes I will try to include a couple live slips. I try not to do my whole slip live. I think it's too difficult, but you can see Suzuki live. He's a big favorite to not get on base, to go under half of a base. So I can try to include this, but we'll see. I just want to make sure that they don't bump it on me. So there's 2 live plays. You can see they already bumped the Tatis play. I just noticed these live lines move very quickly. So in general, they're hard to get locked in. But basically, I can find some of these line discrepancies. Here's a final one. Let me just make sure I got that game correctly. These esports guys go hard. They seemingly have limitless games. So now I have 6 picks. Or actually, I went with 7, so what I can do is I can maybe remove the tennis play. So now I have 6 picks. One of them is live. Every pick has a mathematical edge, is winning above 53.8% of the time. Some of them are just odd discrepancies, like all the books have Dak's line at 0.5 interceptions. They all just have his under heavily favored. And then some of them are line discrepancies, right? Like this esports line, if you go over to PrizePicks, I can actually show you quickly. PrizePicks will log me in. But then what I do is I essentially just lock in the play. So you can see Suzuki's already refreshing, which is why, in my opinion, live betting it's a little tough on Underdog. But if I go to this Olymp play, right, you can see PrizePicks. I had minimum number of data points at 2. PrizePicks and all the other books had his line way higher. at 14.5. You don't really see an NBA player like Jokic, his rebound line at 13.5, 14.5, but there's just so many esports games every single day. Like if you look at CS2, Valorant, there's so many games, so many lines up. I mean, you can see me scrolling on Underdog that the opportunities are kind of just limitless. But let's see if we can get it locked in now. Oh yeah, they're telling me, hey, you already bet on Alyssa Thomas. Hoy, so I'm not going to be able to bet on Alyssa Thomas again, so let me refresh this and let's see what we have here. So here's Ryan O'Hearn to get struck out. This is a live line. Sportsbooks had him to get a strikeout, and they already added a bump to it. So again, live betting, I like it. You can see it's already gone. It's just in general, these lines are, unfortunately, they're kind of flying around, moving quickly. So let's see if this works. Another esports play, and, I don't watch esports, but I don't really care what I'm betting on if all my plays have an edge. So Underdog, this is typically the time in the day when they start to set esports lines, and oftentimes their esports, like you can make a lot of money, probably of my $110,000 in profit. Maybe like 40,000 of it is from esports. There's a lot of line discrepancies, a lot of opportunity because there's like a billion games a day. So then I lock in my slip, 6-pick entry, right? Some football, some college, some esports, one live play. I don't really care what I'm betting on. That's how I use the tool to make money. This is basically what I do every single day and have done for the past few years to make over 100 grand on Underdog. I obviously hope you found this video helpful. Let me know any questions, what I can help with, and, let me know other video ideas too. But thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one.